Pax Roman goddess of peace, daughter of Jupiter, the king of the gods, derived from the Greek goddess Eirene, a political tool used by Augustus to legitimize his reign and stabilize the empire. His plan worked, creating a 200-year-long period of regional peace and stability, often referred to as the Pax Romana. 2,000 years later, the Latin word pax has now been connected to many different regions around the world. The word pax, combined with the Latin name of a nation, is used to denote a period of regional peace. In this video, we'll be taking a look at all the different paces throughout history, or at least the most interesting ones. The oldest nation to receive a pax period is the Neo-Sumerian Empire, or the third dynasty of Ur. The kingdom was founded by Ur-Nammu sometime around 2112 BC, when he successfully united southern Mesopotamia decades after the fall of the Empire of Akkad. Ur-Nammu's son, Shulgi, reigned for nearly 50 years, overseeing a time of great agricultural and economic prosperity. One thing to note is that these pax periods differ from one another based on region and era. The Pax Americana was not a very peaceful period for the region, as even during Shulgi's reign, many great military campaigns were undertaken to expand the kingdom. Some other notable achievements were the completion of the ziggurat of Ur, and Shulgi taking the titles of King of Ur, King of Sumer and Akkad, and King of the Four Corners of the Universe. Following Shulgi's death, the empire remained stable for a few more decades, but cracks began to show. Frequent incursions of Amorite tribes slowly chipped away at the empire's power, weakening its authority, causing certain regions to become more autonomous. The empire collapsed with the 24-year reign of Ibisin, as he quickly lost control of most of the empire, holding just the city of Ur. He remained in power there for another 20 years, till 2004 BC, when an Elamite army sacked the city, capturing Ibisin and imprisoning him in the city of Elam, where he died at an unknown date, and with him died the empire and the Pax Americana, as the region entered a period of political fragmentation, multiple city-states vying for power, until eventually being united once more by Hammurabi of Babylon. Some interpretations of the Pax Americana include Hammurabi's reign, and cite his death in 1750 BC as the actual end of the not-so-peaceful period. The Pax Americana was the relative peace and stability established by the Neo-Assyrian Empire during the 7th century BC. This 70 to 80 year stretch represented Neo-Assyria's peak. The empire attained this success through the reign of 6 kings who continuously expanded and developed the realm. Tiglath-Pileser III established the empire, doubled its size and strengthened it immensely through political and military reforms. His son Shalmaneser V is a bit more complicated. He ruled for just 5 years before being overthrown by his supposed brother Sargon II. The reign of Shalmaneser V is marked by his wars in the Levant and Anatolia. His successor Sargon II, on the other hand, is remembered much more fondly. He stabilized the territories conquered by his presumed father and expanded the empire in nearly all directions. He conquered Babylonia and established a new capital, which he, of course, named after himself. After his death in 705 BC, his son Sennacherib took the throne. He expanded the empire through his wars in the Levant, but what he is most known for are his failed siege of Jerusalem in 701 BC, which is described in the Bible, and his destruction of the city of Babylon in 689 BC. His son, Esarhaddon, conquered Egypt, making the Neo-Assyrian Empire the largest the world had ever seen up to that point. He also reconstructed Babylon after his father's not-so-nice intervention. On ascension to the throne, Esarhaddon faced a civil war against his brothers. Fearing a similar fate for his sons, split the titles of King of Assyria and King of Babylon, his younger son becoming emperor and his older one becoming vassalized king of Babylon. His son, Ashurbanipal, would be the last great king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. He is remembered as a very cruel ruler, although not a very effective conqueror. He lost control of Egypt and is often cited as boasting about committing genocide and massacring civilians. On a more positive note, he created the library of Ashurbanipal. He was an avid collector of texts and tablets. The Pax Americana practically ended with the death of Ashurbanipal, as the empire quickly began to collapse and completely disintegrated just 2 decades later. I assume most people already have a basic idea of the Pax Romana, so I'll keep this one as brief as possible so we can move on to some other interesting areas of the world. The Pax Romana began in 27 BC with the ascension of Augustus and the creation of the Roman Empire. What followed was a 200-year era of peace. As with every other example in this video, these 2 centuries were not devoid of conflict, with many wars taking place both internally and externally. Augustus was very adamant in convincing the Roman population that peace would yield better prospects for the empire. He ultimately succeeded in this endeavor, and the emperors after him followed in his footsteps. The Roman Empire reached its territorial peak in 117 AD under the rule of Emperor Trajan, a size of nearly 6 million kilometers squared and a population of around 60 million. Problems began to arise during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, when a devastating plague hit the empire in 165, the Antonine Plague. It wiped out 5 to 10 million people, or around 10% of the empire's population. As you can imagine, that didn't bode well for the economy. Despite that, Marcus Aurelius is looked upon as the last good emperor of Rome. His son, on the other hand, Commodus, became the youngest emperor in Roman history up until that point, at just 16. His first 3 years he served alongside his father, but after Marcus's death in 180, Commodus became the sole emperor of Rome. His reign signaled the definitive end of the Pax Romana. With almost 2,000 years of hindsight, maybe giving a 16-year-old control over the world's largest empire probably wasn't the best idea, but I think it's too late to warn Marcus anyway. Commodus exuded cruelty, left his imperial duties to those he trusted, and had a very strange obsession with gladiators. His strange obsession and cruelty are described to us by Dio Cassius, who wrote that Commodus would often kill large numbers of animals and people. In one example, he gathered a group of men who had lost their feet, dressed them as serpents, and beat them to death. In 191, the city of Rome was damaged by a fire. Seeing this as a great opportunity to make himself look even worse, Commodus renamed the city of Rome, all the months of the year, the legions, the Senate, and the Roman people themselves. In 192, his mistress Marcia found a list of people Commodus planned to have executed. Funnily enough, her name was on the list, along with Laodice, the Praetorian prefect, and the Chamberlain Eclectus. The 3 of them quickly decided they really would rather not be killed, so poisoned his food. Commodus vomited up the poison and went to take a bath. The 3 conspirators then sent in Narcissus, the emperor's wrestling partner, to strangle him to death. His death was followed by a civil war, and a few decades later the empire entered the crisis of the 3rd century. The rest is sadly not the topic of this video. Unlike most of the other examples in this video, the Pax Sinica does not denote a single era of peace, but rather several eras, spanning over 2,000 years. The first one was during the Han Dynasty. This one is most often compared to the Pax Romana of the Roman Empire. However, it began almost 2 centuries before it. During these 400 years of stability, and that's stability with heavy quotation marks, as we all know how volatile stability was in Imperial China, the Chinese experienced a golden age that will put even the likes of Ninjago to shame. They created some of history's greatest inventions, established the Silk Road, and greatly expanded the empire. This golden age ended around the turn of the 3rd century, and the Han Dynasty subsequently collapsed, leading to a turbulent period of Chinese history, known as the Three Kingdoms era. Stability and prosperity were re-established under the Tang dynasty. During this time, the Chinese continued to invent and expand. At its peak, the Tang dynasty stretched all the way to modern-day Afghanistan, establishing dozens of tributaries and influencing all states around itself, spreading Chinese culture, making this a high point of Chinese culture and civilization. The fall of the Tang dynasty sent China into another tumultuous era, named the Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms period. Very catchy name, I know. We're skipping Yu for now, and going straight to the Ming and Qing dynasty. The Ming dynasty continued to influence countries around itself, but now also began to influence states further away through its maritime expeditions. The Qing dynasty, which succeeded the Ming, saw China's territory and population rapidly increase. At its peak, the Qing Empire controlled nearly 10% of the world's landmass. The Qing dynasty also saw many different ethnic groups being integrated into the empire, creating a true multi-ethnic and multicultural nation. The last 50 years of the Qing dynasty are marked with serial decline and fragmentation, the end finally coming on February 12, 1912, with the abdication of Puyi, marking the end of the Chinese imperial era. Today, China is gearing up for another round of Pax Sinica, this time on a global scale. More on that later in this video. In fear of milking this subject dry, and saying the words Pax, Peace, Period, Era too much, I'll lump a few of these periods into the same section. Sorry to all the Inca Empire fans out there. First up, we have a term which is now considered largely outdated, but one which I nonetheless choose to cover. The Pax Minoica, created by British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, while excavating on the island of Crete, where the Minoans lived during the Bronze Age. During his excavation of Knossos, Evans found very few fortifications and concluded that the Minoans must have been a peaceful civilization, who had no need of any defensive architecture. The evidence of the existence of their navy furthered his theory by establishing the idea that the Minoans were able to ward off all external dangers and live in an untroubled society. More modern expeditions to the island and further research have found more extensive defensive architecture on the island, as well as evidence of internal conflicts within the Minoan civilization, largely debunking the Pax Minoica. Skipping ahead a bit to the Pax Kushana. This was a time of peace and prosperity within the Kushan Empire, which lasted for 200 years. Located in Central and South Asia, the Kushan Empire acted as a bridge between the powerful Iranian and Roman empires of the West, and the Chinese dynasties in the East. Controlling an especially lucrative portion of the Silk Road, the Kushan Empire traded with all the major empires of the time. This created an ecosystem which allowed Buddhism to spread, reaching China and other parts of Asia. Following the fragmentation of the Kushan Empire, the Guptas moved in and secured the eastern portion of the once flourishing empire. The Gupta Empire established its own era of peace and stability, mainly during the 4th and 5th century. The Pax Gupta represents an unparalleled golden age for India and the surrounding regions under Gupta rule, facilitating major developments both scientific and artistic, which would come to influence the future of art and science in India. The Pax Khazarica was a 250-year time period under the Khazars. Similar to the empires of India, the Khazars controlled valuable parts of the Silk Road, creating a large and rich empire. Fun fact, in the 8th century, the Khazars, who were a confederation of many Turkic-speaking peoples, converted to Judaism to assert their independence from the Byzantine Empire and the Muslim Caliphate. But their end would not come by Byzantine or Caliphate hands, but rather by the Kievan Rus, led by Sviatoslav I of Kiev. In the New World, the Inca Empire, or the realm of the four parts, established itself as the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. The Inca Empire is a fascinating entity, reaching unimaginable heights under very tight constraints and restrictions. They notably didn't use iron or steel and didn't have a writing system, instead using a system of colored knotted strings as a form of record keeping. Their rough terrain and lack of large livestock made even the wheel almost completely useless. Despite all of this, they managed to achieve some truly remarkable things, such as their highly complex road network, which was about 40,000 kilometers in total length, and some absolutely incredible architectural creations. The Pax Incaica does not denote a long-lasting period of peace within the Inca Empire, but merely the 34-year reign of Huayna Capac, who expanded the empire and stabilized it, ensuring a peaceful reign and providing the foundations for an empire which would go on to last for centuries. Following his death, his two sons led the empire into a civil war, which allowed the Spanish under Francisco Pizarro to swoop in and conquer the region. Speaking of the Spanish, they established their own empire, and for a short time span of just 23 years, enjoyed a Pax Hispanica. Well, it wasn't exactly peaceful, but it marked a period where Spain, under the rule of Philip III, signed multiple treaties, ending wars with the English, the French, and the Dutch. Right after the death of Philip III, Spain re-entered European conflicts, ending the Pax Hispanica and leading Spain down the road of eventual decline. The other side of Europe, the Ottomans established a contiguous land empire spanning 3 continents, dominating the Balkans, Anatolia, the Middle East, and North Africa. The Ottoman Empire reached its peak in the 16th and 17th century. These 2 centuries under Ottoman rule are referred to by some as the Pax Ottomana. The reason I specify some in this case is that out of all of the eras we discuss in this video, the Pax Ottomana is the one which receives the most pushback, largely being used by people in favor of the Ottoman Empire. Many rebellions occurred under Ottoman rule. Many rebellions. Not just in the Christian Balkans, but in the Middle East and North Africa as well. However, Ottoman rule did ensure no European expansion would take place in these areas. So I guess make of that what you will. Anyways, the Ottoman Empire slowly lost its foothold among the great European powers, slowly losing land either from internal rebellions or foreign wars. The empire's failure to properly industrialize left the empire crippled, completely collapsing following the end of World War I. On the opposite side of the world, Japan entered the Edo period in 1603. Now ruled by the Tokugawa Shogunate, the next 250 years of Japanese history are marked by peace and stability. The Pax Tokugawa. Under a strict isolationist policy, Japan traded exclusively with the Dutch and only on Dejima and Nagasaki. All other foreigners were barred from entry, and so were the Japanese from leaving the island. A process of rapid urbanization, coupled with the newfound peace, allowed Japanese merchants to attain immense wealth. Great developments were made in art, education, and philosophy, and the samurai, who now saw their profession become superfluous, took on administrative roles. The end of the Edo period and the Pax Tokugawa is honestly quite sad. In 1853, a fleet of US warships under the command of Matthew C. Perry delivered a letter from President Millard Fillmore, demanding Japan open its ports up for trade. Perry used gunboat diplomacy to force the Japanese into signing a treaty, even threatening to burn down their capital if he wasn't let through. A treaty was signed on March 31st, 1854, ending Japan's isolation. Japan began to industrialize and strengthen its military in order to assert its own independence from Western influence. The shogunate quickly started to become more and more unpopular, leading to the Boshin War, fought between the Tokugawa Shogunate and a coalition looking to restore imperial power. The shogunate was quickly defeated, and imperial rule was restored in what is now known as the Meiji Restoration. Pax Soprana is the 6th episode of the first season of The Sopranos, wherein Tony Soprano confronts his uncle Corrado Jr. Soprano about the greedy tactics which he is now employing as new boss of the DeMeo crime family. Tony hopes to achieve an era of peace, similar to that of Augustus, who he later references when convincing his uncle to be more generous with his captains. Junior ultimately agrees, starting an age of pure peace and serenity within the DeMeo crime family, which lasts a whopping 4 episodes before Junior decides to have Tony killed. Glorified crews aside, a term describing peace within organized crime groups does exist, the Pax Mafiosa. Unlike the other terms in this video which denote a specific time and place, the The Pax Mafiosa is a general term used to describe any peace brought on by competing organized crime groups. This usually happens when two competing groups agree to not interfere in each other's territory. The name originates from the Sicilian Mafia, and that is where it is most commonly used, but it is also connected to the American Mafia and drug cartels. The Sinaloa cartel has their own term, Pax Sinaloa, with a broader term also existing, Pax Narcotica. The Mongol Empire is the largest contiguous empire in human history, at its peak spanning 18% of the planet's landmass. The empire began in 1206, when Temujin, a tribal leader who had unified the warring nomadic tribes of the Eurasian steppe, was proclaimed as Khan. He took on the title of Genghis Khan and quickly introduced sweeping reforms. With a strict military structure, he forbade the sale of women and internal conflicts amongst Mongols. He allowed religious freedom and was a big fan of trade of goods and knowledge. He also really liked killing people and taking their land. By the time of his death in 1227, the empire already stretched from Manchuria to the Caspian Sea. Genghis Khan's descendants carried on his conquests, pushing to Europe and warring with the likes of Hungary and Poland. Despite all of the killing, plundering, and overall destruction that the Mongols caused, their reign over these newly conquered territories established a long-lasting peace, one called the Pax Mongolica, or Pax Tatarica. As the empire now controlled the Silk Road, it made trade throughout the empire extremely safe, facilitating an exchange of goods and knowledge. At its height, the Mongols were exceptionally well organized, in and out of battle. The empire as a whole didn't last long, as with the death of the fourth great Khan, Mongke Khan, in 1259, the Mongols began to fight internally, slowly splitting the empire into four separate states: the Golden Horde in Eastern Europe, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Iran, and the Yuan dynasty in China. Despite the messy divorce, the Pax Mongolica survived, as all four states continued to enforce security within their borders. The peace in China is sometimes referred to as a Pax Sinica, even though the emperor also held the title of Great Khan. As the four states began distancing themselves from one another, the Pax Mongolica slowly began to disintegrate. This process was sped up by the Black Death, which spread across trade routes. All four states eventually fell, but all at different times. This next section is the second most well known, right behind the Pax Romana, so I'll once again try to keep this short, as I assume most people are knowledgeable about Victorian era Britain. The Pax Britannica refers to the peace between the great powers, which stretched roughly from the end of the Napoleonic Wars to the start of World War I. During this 100-year time span, the British Empire was the undisputed global power. As mentioned previously, there was no absence of war. Many of the great European powers waged war with others and amongst themselves. But the UK began to distance itself from Europe through a policy named splendid isolation. Instead, they used their unmatched naval power and relatively small army to act as a global policeman. Their only major competition during the 19th century was the Russian Empire, in a rivalry which is called the Great Game, wherein the UK and Russia competed for influence in Central Asia. London's influence reached all 6 inhabited continents, forming the largest empire in human history. Although its size would continue to expand past the Pax Britannica, this era is Britain's peak in power and influence. By the turn of the 20th century, alliances in Europe began to shift, and the UK re-entered the European concert. The newly founded German Empire sought to challenge the UK's naval dominance. Tensions in the Balkans boiled over into the Balkan Wars, weakening the Ottoman Empire even more. Austria-Hungary and Russia were now facing internal tensions, and France was eager to reconquer the territory it recently lost to the Germans. The UK could no longer ignore the situation and sided with France and Russia, creating the Triple Entente to combat the Triple Alliance, which had formed decades earlier, comprised of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The Pax Britannica ended in 1914, with the start of World War I, leading to the eventual downfall of the British Empire, which stretched throughout the 20th century. We have finally reached the Pax Americana, or the Long Peace. Following the end of World War II, the United States took over the UK's role as global policeman. Using their unparalleled naval power and high-quality army, they helped establish a long-lasting peace in the Western world. Can't say the same for the rest of the world. The Pax Americana stretches all the way to today, and is actually subdivided into other Pax periods. For example, the absence of direct war between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War is referred to as the Pax Atomica. The peace facilitated in Europe by NATO and the EU carries the name Pax Europaea. The peace within the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe is the Pax Sovietica. We're now firmly in contemporary history, as with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the US was left with no major adversary on the global stage, free to do pretty much whatever it pleased. Today China is looking to become that global adversary. As we mentioned in the Pax Sinica section, China has experienced immense growth over the last 40 to 50 years, and is eager to take the US's place as the leading global superpower. During this video, I've probably said the word Pax more times than I'll say it for the rest of my life. The harsh reality is that war is an integral part of the human condition, and that no Pax lasts forever. There were a few other periods I neglected to cover in this video due to their somewhat dubious success in actually bringing peace to a region, such as the Pax Dei, which was a movement in medieval Europe led by the medieval church, with the goal of reducing violence from the 10th to 12th century, which wasn't exactly successful. Another one would be the Pax Austriaca, or Pax Habsburgica, which was more of a goal and strategy rather than an actual achieved long-standing peace within the House of Habsburg. Lastly, there are modern terms associated with certain countries which weren't really interesting enough to warrant their own section, yet I still feel the need to mention them, so here are a few. Pax Russica, used to denote Russia's sphere of influence. Pax Praetoriana, referring to the peace and stability in modern-day South Africa and its sphere of influence. Pax Nigeriana, referring to Nigeria and Western Africa as a whole. The Pax Helvetica, for Switzerland's neutrality following the Napoleonic Wars. Pax Islamica, a term for peace within the territories which are called Dar al-Islam, or Abode of Islam, which are territories under Muslim sovereignty. The Pax Syriana, which represents Syria's attempt to influence and dominate its neighbors, or more accurately, represents Syria's attempt to influence and dominate Lebanon. There's also the Pax Italica listed on Wikipedia, but any and all attempts to research this term lead to Hearts of Iron mods and Wattpad fanfics. Okay, I think that's everything. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something new you can tell your friends or family. If you liked the video, please like, share, and comment. If you didn't, feel free to dislike and leave your grievances in the comments down below. I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribed, but no pressure. Have a beautiful day, and hopefully I will see you all in the next video.